Hello everyone, I am Diego Saldivar, a Neurogames designer, and I recently found out a little bit of a creative technologist. So for this update, I'm going to be using what I have already presented last week and showcase my Neurogames template, which you can use to start making your very own Neurogames for the Neurosity Crown, or the Notion if you have an older model. So as you may remember, last year I made a Neurogames template for Unreal Engine 5. It doesn't quite work if you want to distribute your game, but I mean, you can start experimenting with that. So I'm going to be taking this template as my aesthetic basis for the Unity Neurogame template that I'm going to be showcasing. So I'm going to be basing myself off of the infrastructure that I have already created for the web app in Unity using Ryan Turney's SDK. And then I am going to be using the Starter Assets third-person character controller given for free by Unity Technologies as, a starter asset. This way I would have a template that would look kind of like my previous Unreal template with a robot going around in a placeholder-like environment so that you can concentrate on the innovations that concern the crown or the Neurosity device that you're using. And here it is. You can just go to GitHub, download the repository, and or also the build so that you can test it out without having to download the entire thing and opening scripts, etc. I'm still going to be explaining a little bit more step by step a few features that you can expect to see. Take into account that porting for mobile may require you to go back and consult the Notion SDK for Unity and some Fire-based documentation as well as the beginner assets documentation, because you have to not only change some values here and there, but also you have to give your asset store codes and keys and things like that. So make sure to check those out before you try just porting for mobile. However, there's also one very interesting thing that I'm going to be going in depth later on. I'm using hard-coded encryption for your data being saved, your login and password, just so that it's kind of difficult to pry. However, you should not rely on that when you're building, sharing, or distributing. I'm gonna go in depth later on about that. So I have said before, what good is a game that you cannot play? So I have built the game so that we can check if it works outside of Unity. And there you go, made with Unity. If I hit start, I'm going to be sent usually to settings in order to put my email and password. There we go. I can tell it to remember me for later on. I can log in, password is invalid. Ooh, so I may have written it in full caps. So let's try again. Log in. Ah, there we are. Okay, so I can select my crown. I only have one device. You select it, and if the device is not giving me good data because it's offline, I can tell my player, hey, how about you fit your device, connect to Wi-Fi using the Neurosity app if you haven't already, place the headset at a 45-degree angle because that is usually the most common problem with new users, and then you can check if your device, in this case, well, it's offline, and there you go. That's my crown CB5 with 78% battery and some calm and focus. So let's go back, start, and then I will be sent right into the playground. I have added one cube to the left and one sphere to the right. The more calm I am, the slower the cube will rotate, and the more concentrated I am, the higher the sphere will go. And of course I have a heads-up display to the bottom left in order to give the player a heads up for, hey, this is happening. So be sure to either change the aesthetics of it or get rid of it if you don't want it there for your own gameplay purposes, depending on the aesthetics of your game design or whatever your art director tells you to do. course, I can go to the Start menu by pressing Escape, Start menu, and then you'll see that we can go to credits, and this is where I recommend you to give credits where credits are due, especially for the Neurosity and Notion SDK designers, as well as, yours truly, who gave you a little bit of an easy way into the Neurogame market. So this is the project. I left the README for the welcome starter asset so that you can easily reference that, because we're using the starter assets to create our template. And also, I think you would like to check out specifically the scripts folder. In the Notion Unity folder, you will find the handlers and the types, along with a modified device, which is a scriptable object. And I think it has to keep being a scriptable object, otherwise the architecture will fail when it comes to pointers and communicating with a Firebase. Otherwise, go to handlers and change how they communicate with Unity by taking into account, or as an example, anything that has been done for the focus, the calm, and the accelerometer. In the script folders, if you go to template, you'll find the scripts I made for this template. The calm cube and the focus sphere are kind of straightforward. You can just see that they take information from the Notion interfacer, which is right here. It is a singleton, which also happens to be persistent, so that it's the only Notion interfacer being logged in the entire game. This is for a single player game, of course. You may want to modify that for multiplayer. The Neuro HUD is basically the heads-up display that you saw in the playground. This Neurosity user data is basically a device instance, which is empty, which is going to be used in the Notion interfacer, just to be able to communicate with a Firebase and Notion. Curiously enough, in the editor, if you type your email, your password, device ID, and whether it's remembered, this is an innovation from me, you'll see that it's going to be saved if you click is remembered. However, the problem is when you build this game, this data is going to disappear every single time you open the game. So that's why we have to save that data in a persistent file outside. Let's check the Notion interfacer. There are a few things I want to talk about. As you can see, the code is very heavily commented, just in case you, like me, are not very familiar with some not very beginner-friendly concepts such as Firebase. I think the one very important thing to understand is how data is saved. The scriptable object cannot be saved because it's not serializable, so you have to put that into a serializable class, which I put all the way below. It's that one, save data. You just literally save some strings. But some very important thing to remember is that when I save that data, it's being encrypted with a hard-coded key. This is not secure or ideal. I recommend that you use an actually secure encryption algorithm, or have the key elsewhere, not just hard-coded. That's just so that you can ensure that your user's data is secure in your client. If you just save the data as is, anyone can go to the file, open it in a text editor, and then you can see your email, your password, and your device ID. You can just read it, copy paste it, which is something that can be exploited later on. So to add one very thin layer of security, I have used this encryption algorithm to basically scramble that, so that if anyone goes to the encrypted data, they will see just a bunch of garbage or Chinese characters, because it just scrambles the data in such a way that the ASCII misinterprets it as whatever it can, without actually being able to give you any human readable information. So that's why I use this kind of spit and prayer approach to encrypt the data for the time being. You can use your own algorithm methods or anything that makes you comfortable when it comes to making logging data secure. And I mean, as for the rest, you can just go to the GitHub and read it for yourselves, or just check the project in Unity and try the code out yourselves. So if you have downloaded my previous GitHub application, you may remember that there was a Notion interfacer. I have expanded it to have some override values, or if you have a test device with some user data ready to log in, you can just put it there and log in from Inspector instead of having to go all the way to this screen and then log in and then start. Let me show you how that would go. If you go to scenes, you may see that in scene 1, playground, you can just open that, and yes, we already are there with our heads-up display. If I play that playground just like that without anything else, you may see that the heads-up display down below has an X and absolutely no data. That's because it didn't find any Notion interfacer to pull the data from, so let's solve that. If you go to the prefabs folder, you'll see that I have the Notion interfacer there. I can just drag and drop it. You see that it already has the device called Neurosity user data. It's empty, so if I log in from Inspector, it's not going to log in. So let's just try playing with that. And you can see that yet again, it doesn't have any data to give me because I am not logged in. So if I had any kind of device that I could log in from the inspector, just click this Boolean, which I mean, I'm taking as a button of sorts, and then it will just log you in. Or you can just override whatever data is here, even if it's empty. So let's try doing that. In this case, I don't want to override it remembered. I want to just forget this once I'm done. And then I just click login with override data. There we go. And then I have to just wait for this. There we go. We're logged in, and then we're receiving information which is being fed not only to the heads-up display, but also into the world with this cube rotating slower the calmer I am, and the sphere floating higher the more I concentrate. And of course, you can just go around, run, jump. It's just a placeholder, right? But it lets you test any kind of gameplay or mechanics that you want to introduce. And of course, you could just actually make a game with all of these. Use the examples I give you in the scripts folder so that you know what kind of syntax you have to use to pull information from this Notion interfacer into any other kind of object in the scene. And that's it for the Neurogames template. I hope that you check it out and maybe send me over your own Neurogame prototypes. I would love to see them. I would also love to get your feedback and your suggestions. And with that, have a nice summer and see you around. Goodbye!